Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer this week called on his caucus to do whatever it takes to pass voting rights, even if it means changing Senate rules to get it done without Republican support. Joining us now from South Carolina, the number 3 Democrat in the House, Jim Clyburn. Congressman, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you so much for having me back.
You know, you said in a podcast, Congressman, this week that if you don't get voting rights done, it will be the beginning of the end of democracy. You also wrote in a column this week about the January 6th attack on the Capitol, comparing it to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, writing, 80 years later, tyranny is threatening America again, this time from a domestic attack. You know, Vice President Harris obviously had a similar construct with Pearl Harbor and 9/11. What do you say to families of World War II veterans who lost somebody at Pearl Harbor, or 9/11 families, victims' families, who agree that January 6th was a very bad day and a dark day in our history, but that comparison's not fair and seems to be being used to pitch voting rights legislation that was drawn up before January 6th?
I will remind them of the oath that all of us take when we take office, especially the President of the United States. That oath says, against all enemies, foreign and domestic, a recognition of the fact that there will be times in our development when we have to deal with the enemy from within. So I would ask those people who say that's an unfair comparison, why is it then that that construct is sitting there in the oath that all of us take? That is a recognition that there will be times, or could be, when we will have domestic terrorists among us.
What about, Congressman, the argument that the U.S. Constitution leaves election laws to the states? Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, who's famously rebuffed President Trump's prodding for finding additional votes, pointed to Article 1, Section 4 in writing opposition to H.R. 1, and he wrote that federal legislators have no idea how elections are actually run, saying, quote, as a result, they choose policies that create chaos in elections administration that can overwhelm county election officials. In doing so, they create a vicious cycle where they set local election administrators up to fail, then demand federal intervention to address the problem they cause. Thoughts?
I would say to Mr. Raffensperger that I admire and respect him a whole lot, but he's off base here. I am a federal official, but I understand very well how elections are run. Most people who are now serving at the federal level have at one time served in some capacity at the state and local levels as well. So they too have an understanding. I would also refer him to Federalist Papers, I think it's 59, where Alexander Hamilton talked very cogently about this. And he says there that these federal elections cannot be left up to the states, should not be left up to the states. That's why states were not allowed to put term limits on federal officials. So the elections are not solely conducted by the states. That's why the 1965 Voting Rights Act was necessary. And that is why the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution was necessary. That's why the 18th Amendment of the United States Constitution is necessary. All because it had to go beyond the states to determine everything about elections.
So, Congressman, it doesn't seem like they have the numbers in the Senate. I'll get a little bit more to that in a second. But there is bipartisan support for a change to the Electoral Count Law Act, that deals specifically with the Vice President and Congress and the certification of the election. And you could get a change to that right away. Why not take that?
Well, we'll take that, but that's not all we need to do. You know, I've studied the Tilden-Hayes Compromise most of my life. And so I know exactly what led to all of that, the 1876 elections. I know South Carolina played a very critical role in that.
It did, sir.
So did Florida.
And Louisiana.
That you had represented here earlier today. So I know all of those issues. And I also know that what is true today was not true then. And therefore, the kind of changes that we need to make, the kind of modifications that we need to make, must fit the times. That's why so many learned jurists have referred to the Constitution as a living document, which means the Constitution is updated, it's changed, it's modified as conditions change and are updated. And so that's what we need to do here.
Well, barring...
Just because you got one little nugget that was true back in 1876 doesn't mean that that is true in 1976. You know, today's Sunday. I grew up in a parsonage, and I'm thinking about 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter here, where Paul said to his son Timothy, when I became a man, I put away childish things.
Okay.
This country has matured. This country is not the same country it was over 200 years ago. And so we as a people must mature right along with it.
Barring the bipartisan change, if you do that, you say you want the bigger, broader change, obviously, Democrats will likely have to resort to changing the rules in the Senate. And as I said, Senators Manchin and Sinema don't seem like they're there yet. I want to ask you about the filibuster. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren said this about the filibuster. The filibuster has deep roots in racism, and it should not be permitted to serve that function or to create a veto for the minority. In a democracy, it's majority rules. You agree with that?
Well, yes, I do. The majority always determine the outcome of the election. So the fact of the matter is the filibuster will not allow for a majority. You got to have a simple majority in order to get to the majority. That's the fallacy of this. Now, the filibuster was put in place. Now, I know the history of the filibuster. John C. Calhoun, that everybody attributes the filibuster to, when he perfected the filibuster, he wasn't talking about slavery. He was talking about the banking laws. He didn't want to have national banking laws. Just what this country would be like today if we did not have national banking laws. And that's what John C. Calhoun was arguing against.
Right.
So I want us to grow up. I want us to look at this and say, come on, this is a new day. Right. These are different circumstances.
Yeah.
So the filibuster has been changed time and time again. Back when they were filibustering, when Strom Thurmond set the record in 1957, you had to stand on the floor.
Right.
Today, you can sit downtown in a spa.
That's right.
And fall in the filibuster.
Just what the senator said.
The filibuster law.
Yeah, the U.S. technically, obviously, is a constitutional federal republic. Democrats, the last time they were in the minority, just the last time, used the filibuster 270 times. And one of them was to block the Justice Act, a police reform bill put forward by a black Republican senator, Tim Scott, from your state.
Well, you know, you can call a Justice Act, you can call the act anything you want to call it. Now, I don't know exactly what was contained in that law, but, you know, when you filibuster in order to get time so that people can bring people around to your point of view, that's one thing. But that is still a policy. That's not stopping anybody from voting. That's not a constitutional issue. I have said that the filibuster ought not be applied to constitutional issues like voting. Okay. We do not allow the filibuster to get in the way of the full faith and credit of the United States of America, because it would jeopardize the future of this country.
You could argue that police reform is search and seizure, and that's a constitutional issue. I just want to ask you one more thing, because I'm running out of time. You are the man responsible, as much as anybody, for candidate Biden in the primaries, resuscitating his prospects in South Carolina. Do you think President Biden is being well served by his advisors now? Do you think he's getting good advice?
Well, you know, I don't know all of his advisors, and I suspect that there may be some advisors that I will disagree with. But I think that by and large, this president is doing a great job. I think the Rescue Act that everybody said he couldn't get done, he got it done. The infrastructure bill that is now in place, Build Back Better, which should be in place, restoring people's faith and confidence in what this country is all about. I believe that Joe Biden is doing exactly what this country needs done. And I would hope that people who want to see an autocracy replace this democracy will give up on that pursuit.
And you think he runs for re-election?
I hope he does.
Congressman
I'm
Clyburn.
older than Joe.
Yeah, Congressman,
he's a young guy compared to me.
Congressman Clyburn, thank you for your time on this Sunday morning.
Thank you very much for having me.